Throughout my filmmaking career, I've been searching for the lens, and I finally found it. I'm gonna say it now, it's kind of like a cheat code to movie-like images. This is the Helios 44-2 58mm f2. But this is not just your average vintage lens, it's actually modded for filmmakers. I'll explain more later, but for now, I want to immerse you into the look it gives. Soft, yet charismatic, with its signature swirly bokeh. And I know a lot of filmmakers have talked about this lens already, but now that I finally got my hands on one, I wanted to see what it'd be like to actually film my life with it. So, here we are back in Seoul, Korea. It's got enough character to get rid of that digital edge from cameras like the Sony A7CII II, and with its soft, pleasing look and nostalgic character, this lens will make your life look like a movie. You see, this Helios 44-2 has something special, and I'm sure you've noticed it already. It's the oval bokeh. It's usually reserved for anamorphic lenses, but this time it's done through a mod by Ironglass, a company that mods and rehouses vintage Soviet lenses. I've also requested them to add a 16-blade aperture for the smooth bokeh circles, or in this case, it's the ovals. It's a great way to add to that filmic look without needing an anamorphic lens. Since it's a spherical lens, what you see is what you get. You don't really need to de-squeeze the image anymore. While I still look for that, I crop the image to a 2.35:1 aspect ratio, just like you see in this video. One thing that's great about this lens is that it's small and light compared to most anamorphic lenses. So it's a great substitute for traveling light while keeping a lens with character. But you might ask, since this is a vintage photography lens, how come we can use it for filmmaking? Enter the Batman. One of my favorite films shot in recent years, and can you actually believe that it's been more than 2 years since it came out? You see, Greg Fraser, the cinematographer for The Batman, used 2 Soviet vintage lenses for the movie in addition to the other super expensive detuned anamorphic lenses. The first one was the Jupiter 9. You guessed it, the Helios 44-2. Exactly the lens we have now. But it doesn't really look like the one that we have. That's because it's rehoused in a cinema-style body. I mean, the one that they used in The Batman, to make it production ready. The cost to rehouse a lens ranges from $2,000 to $4,000 and up, giving an old vintage lens new life as a cinema lens. For the average consumer, that might be expensive. Heck, even for me, after being in this for a while, it's still quite pricey to rehouse a lens. And the process is usually lengthy. But what if I told you that there's an affordable alternative? What we have here is something called a Cinemod, where we add parts to the existing vintage housing. We have gears attached to the focus and iris rings, so we can put a follow focus on it for smooth manual focusing needs. We can also alter the bokeh by adding an anamorphic mod, basically an oval shape inside the lens to give the bokeh a custom shape. The downside of it is that when you stop down, the shape doesn't get retained because the aperture blades still form a circle rather than an oval. So we're forced to shoot at wide open, which is gorgeous in my opinion. Alright, but if I have you totally hooked and ready to buy a modded Helios from their website, hold your horses. There might be a few deal breakers. First, let's talk about flaring. I know everyone loves flares to an extent, but this lens has some serious flares going on. It lowers down the contrast, and at times, it can be way too much. This is due to the original coating, which may have degraded over time, considering how old these lenses are. For me though, I can easily avoid flaring or use it to my advantage depending on the look or shot that I'm going for. It can be tasteful if done right. Second thing is the focus breathing. Since this is a photography lens, focus breathing is apparent. But it doesn't really bother me since I'm not paying a premium for cinema lenses that eliminate focus breathing. I'm here for the character, for the imperfections of this Soviet vintage lens. And my thoughts are the same when it comes to flaring. I can easily avoid it or slowly just rack focus. Now, if I got you super curious about the costs and different mods or enhancements to this lens by Iron Glass, let me break it down. This lens starts at $310 US with your chosen mount, of course. I opted for the PL mount, which is $20 more, but it's worth it because I plan on using this on different cameras. I got it shipped a few months ago all the way from Ukraine, and I was already thinking of buying this camera so I could put a PL adapter on for flexibility. With the Sony A7CII, it's a perfect balance because it's still fairly a small package. The PL to E adapter is a little bit bigger, but I'm fine with that. You can always opt in for the E-mount version of this setup. What you see here are the colors from the original characteristics of this lens, but you can also choose an amber internal coating or purple coating for a more sci-fi look. The installed focus gear are a great touch, easier for manual focusing handheld, but one thing you need to get used to is that the focus gear is so close to the PL mount that if you're not paying attention, you might be trying to focus the PL lock instead. After a few days of filming with it though, I naturally got used to it, so it's no sweat. One thing I didn't know about Soviet vintage lenses is that when you select an aperture, it shows you the opposite number, which is how it's actually designed. This is called a preset aperture lens. This is great because I can lock in the aperture at f2 to fully utilize that oval bokeh without accidentally changing it while filming. And if you want to learn more about this, I've attached a link to a blog in the description about preset aperture lenses. Another element that I really adore about this lens is how it captures highlights. I'm a big fan of how smooth they are because it takes away the digital look of the Sony A7CII. I think this, alongside with the lower contrast, really balances out the image and makes it feel like a scene from a movie. Overall, the Helios 44-2 is such a beautiful lens, and the images that it produces are just quite heavenly. A Soviet vintage spherical lens with modded anamorphic features, this lens is a great alternative for travel because it's smaller, easier to handle without needing additional accessories. Now, if you want to download some of the footage that you've seen today, you can just color grade it on your own. It's available on Patreon. And if you have any specific questions about the Helios 44-2, let me know in the comments down below or message me on Instagram. But until then, I'll see you in the next video. Peace.